inside us, we have a noble king and we have a court jester. And the noble king knows what's right for his kingdom. He knows good from bad, right from wrong. He is in charge of this kingdom. And in his ear whispers the court jester. And this noble king wasn't always, an adult. Sometimes, like that, he was a boy at one point, and all he had was the court jester to look after him. And the court jester did the best he could, but he's just a freaking court jester.
Mm-hmm.
He's not of noble blood, and he got it wrong a lot of the times, and he still gets it wrong sometimes. And so, as we kind of figure out what that court jester is for us, like our ego, we kind of take control of this like volume knob, and we can either we can decide to turn the volume up on the court jester, or we can turn it down sometimes.
All right. My name is Tyler Hurst. I am a plant medicine facilitator and yoga teacher here in Phoenix. I'm here with Scott Stanley. Scott, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I am the director of the Arizona Yahé Assembly. It's a little ayahuasca church in Arizona, as well as director of the North American Association of Visionary Churches. The church itself has been hosting ayahuasca ceremonies since about 2015, and we have a little Moloka yurt out in the Arizona desert. We're engaged in a number of different projects right now. One of those, a big part of that is working with combat vets, but we also have a nature conservancy down in Peru. Where we're also engaged in a civil rights suit with several federal agencies to simply proactive attempt to secure our rights. So we've got a number of things going on, but that's just kind of there's a thumbnail for you, Tyler.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you, Scott. So I've been sitting with Scott since 2017, and we have been working together off and on since then. We've traveled together, and so he had this idea to start interviewing people that we thought were very, very interesting who've attended ayahuasca or in the plant medicine community whatsoever. And so we thought of Rich. We thought of you. So Rich, who are you? And tell us about what makes you come alive, what you've been working on. What's going on, man?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. So first off, I just want to say thank you. Anytime I get to rap with Scott on plant medicine and philosophy or anything of the like, I get excited about it. But yeah, I guess we can just start. I graduated West Point in 2009. I was in the infantry. I served 5 years active duty, one combat tour to Afghanistan. My life took some pretty interesting kind of turns after that. And, one way or another, I'm sure we'll get into it, kind of led me to plant medicine for a variety of reasons. And, I've always kind of felt called to be a leader in my community, in the military. Afterwards, I pursued coaching. I was a strength and conditioning coach for a long time. I opened up a facility in Phoenix, Liberty Performance Training. And I kind of see this now as just like the evolution of my coaching. And so I started another company called Apricus Coaching Initiative, and I do preparation, integration for plant medicine, along with a lot of other things. But I really focus on the mental journey and just try to meet people where they are. Yeah, I think defining what makes me come alive, I'm like a very excitable person. There's a lot that makes me come alive. But I do feel very fulfilled with helping people with the hard stuff internally, for sure.
Okay, cool. So Scott, how did you meet Rich? He sat in a ceremony. How did this connection beyond medicine come?
So AYA has been our little church, Arizona Yahé Assembly, has been working with a little group called I Am Mission. I Am Mission was spawned out in order to bring combat vets in ayahuasca ceremonies. This past November 11th, I made it a mission to bring 22 combat veterans in ayahuasca ceremony in recognition of the fact that 22 veterans kill themselves every day. That idea once it broke out of the box, really took off. The impetus here was the pivot point was Rich's integration work. So I was introduced to Rich through Aya Mission and Ulysses. That's Rich ran. How many was, I think, 3 integration sessions before we actually pre-integration, before we had our weekend ceremony, and then there was follow through integration as well. And then we had, after each ceremony, we had integration circles. And man, it was just so extraordinary to hear these stories. It was just really to hear these guys talk about their journey, their transformation, what was going on for them, was which liquid inspiration, from my point of view. So it was a real pleasure getting to know Rich, and we were talking the other day about some of the things he's got cooking, but including his book. And Rich, I'm really curious and interested to hear you talk more about your book, because it incorporates a lot of these, if you want to call them techniques, these integration techniques, are incorporated into your book. But I think more than that, it's kind of a mindset, right? You're teaching people a mindset. You're showing them the something about a stance or a platform to come from when they're engaging with integration. That's what I hear when I hear you amplify and really assist and facilitate as people work through the early stages before they come into ceremony, and then what's happening for them afterwards.
Hey, Rich, I want you to talk a little bit about what that experience was like, especially the before and then the during. I guess not during, but right after ceremony. I'm assuming you were on site for most of this, or all of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more thing, his book is called Magic is Real, Ayahuasca Integration and Non-Ordinary Reality. And we're going to talk a lot more about that afterwards, as soon as he starts telling us about his experience integrating 22 military vets.
Yeah, it was military. Yeah. I don't even really know where to start with all of it, because it's such a complex path. My first experience with ayahuasca was in Peru. I went with a group called Heroic Hearts Project down to the Amazon. We stayed at a place called La Medicina, and I got the real deal down there. And I went there for many different reasons. I think primarily to redefine my relationship with alcohol. I was, looking back now, I didn't know how to define it at the time, but I was just a super impulsive person in general. And it's funny, I interviewed with Heroic Hearts Project, and I'm kind of like, I had a combat deployment, but I'm like, man, I started second guessing myself, and I'm like, this is for guys that were pulling each other's body parts out of buildings. And it's just, I had a kinetic enough deployment, but I didn't have anything like that happen. I was very, very lucky a lot of times, but, so I get through this interview, and the guy's like, so tell me about your combat experience. And so I tell him, and I'm like, but it sits pretty good with me. I don't have, I had some panic attacks when I first got back, but I've kind of like dealt with that. I don't have nightmares anymore, that kind of thing. But that being said, I have a huge problem with alcohol. I'm just really impulsive behavior. I've been divorced twice. I've just thrown away relationships that are really important to me. And I just don't feel like I'm in control. And he kind of like laughed, and he goes, well, it's like not exactly normal for a person to volunteer for a job that requires them to kill people and get shot at. So for most of us, our trauma happens before we were in the military. It was like light bulbs started going off in my head, because I had never even considered it, right? Like I had never even looked at my past and what led me to this path that I was on. And so that, I wish it was simple, right? I wish it was like, oh yeah, we just prepare like this, and then we have ceremony, and then we integrate, and then everything's easy, right? But it just isn't like that. And it looks different for every single person. And when I had, just absolutely tremendous experiences in Peru, I really did. And, we can definitely get into that later if you'd like. But, when I got back, I experienced that afterglow period, and then it went away. And then I kind of, I went.
Could we define this? When did you go to Peru? Like, when was this?
This was July or June of 2023.
June 2023.
And so, I get back and I have this like kind of afterglow period where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm ready to change my whole life. I'm ready. And that lasted for a month, and then it started going away. And I was like, okay, well, my friend calls it sober curious. She's like, I was getting sober curious, and I was setting rules for myself around alcohol and breaking them immediately. I'll drink 2 meters here tonight, and then 2 would lead to 3, would lead to 4, would lead to 6 again. And then, okay, I'm only going to drink twice a week. And I start breaking those rules too. And I started really realizing that I had a real problem with alcohol. And as that's happening, this experience that I had in Peru is still with me. And it was truly this divine experience. I was shown, my divine. And at least that's what I think. And that kind of stuck with me. And because it stuck with me and I just kept on chewing on it and I kept on working on it, I was able to eventually get there and make the decision to get sober. And celebrated my 1-year anniversary just a day after my birthday last month. So thank you. Yeah, pretty cool. But, and that was just a piece of it. So then I started looking at the space in general, the plant medicine space in general. And I think that we are just at this really important time for plant medicine. And I think it's a little bit scary. I think it's a little bit interesting. I think people are getting more curious about this amazing, these amazing substances. But with curiosity comes a whole lot of other things. And can come abuse and availability and all of these different things that really undermine what the medicine can actually do for people. And I kind of just started falling into this path that I saw for myself pretty naturally. I had already been involved with a lot of different veterans groups and that sort of thing. And I'd always been a coach for a long time. And I
coach strength, like strength coach, right? Like this more body focused.
Yep, absolutely. But I mean, anyone who's been a strength coach will tell you,
no, it's meant to be
half strength coach.
But you were at least physically focused anyway.
Yes, correct. And I still think that that's a major part of health in general. But I kind of fell into this idea that I could help people prepare for ceremony because of just kind of like a peculiar way that I think about things. And I don't feel like I had the best coaching before my experience. I did have coaching though, and that was certainly helpful. But I'm like, man, there's so many things that I wish I would have been prepared for going in. And then afterward, for sure, and that's not my coach's fault, right? That's a combination of my ability to be on going into it and many other things. But, but I just see this now, man, there are just so many things that people need to be aware of before they even have an experience with the medicine in order to really, hopefully reap the benefits from this, what I think is probably the most powerful thing that I've ever come across.
Can I ask you to name anything that comes to mind that you make sure people know before they go into ceremony?
The very first thing that comes to mind is breathwork. I think breathwork is, people are very resistant to it. I'm still resistant to it sometimes. It's hard to, it takes a lot of courage in this very fast-paced world that we live in to slow down and take that time and just connect with your breath. But that breathwork is just, it's your ultimate tool as you're kind of like working with the medicine, in my opinion. And, I had experienced an ego death, and like an ego death is it's like that term is just so abused, right? And it's just like people get it wrong all the time. And my ego death in Peru was horrific. It was so scary. I totally lost my mind. I think a lot of veterans too, they probably have very powerful egos. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Man, when I lost track of that voice that talks to me, I thought my brain, I thought I was going to be insane forever. I was purging all at the same time. It was this crazy experience that was so scary. And if only I had been able to connect with my breath, I could have got through that, and it could have been so different. So that's the big one that really, really stands out. But also, I mean, preparation is about preparing for integration. you know, because you never truly know what the medicine is going to give you on a given night. But you know that it's going to give you what you need for sure. So there's only so much you can do to prepare yourself for that, like peace and that, you know, the ability to hopefully work with the medicine and be flexible and be strong and resilient. But you're preparing for integration to make the most out of your time. And that includes having things available to you when you get back to sit with yourself and think and unpack everything and begin interpreting things and just to ground yourself afterwards, and not just jump immediately right back into this like crazy, you know, life that we live most of the time. And so, yeah, I think those are the things that really just come to mind first off.
Cool. Rich, here's a question for you. What are some of the key elements in an after ceremony, things that you recommend to actions that people can take to integrate and incorporate?
I really think that after I kind of follow this process of and that looks different for everyone when you spend different amounts of time with each step, depending on a lot of things. But the first step is just grounding and just like taking your time. You know, no matter what kind of experience you have, like if you have a, you know, oh my gosh, like this was tremendous, I'm going to go change the world. Like just pump the brakes and take your time, right? And spend time grounding. If you have a yoga practice, amazing. If you have a breathwork practice, amazing. Certainly if you have a fitness practice, amazing. Just take time to be with yourself a little bit longer, no matter what experience you had. And from that grounding experience, once you start feeling like comfortable again in this rhythm, unpacking your experience. And, you know, I kind of use the metaphor of unpacking, like just dumping all your camping gear out on the table. You don't have to do anything with it yet. Just like get it all out on the table. I think like journaling is a great way to do that. Just writing about your experiences, just trying to collect them because they're fleeting. You know, even the most beautiful things are, you know, they're there and then they're gone. And it's kind of like, I think of them like bubbles from like a soda or something like that. You know, they're fizzing and they're gone. You know, they're almost there. Like you can almost grasp at them. But and so like writing things down and just unpacking it.
Okay. Well, here's a question for you. I don't want to talk. I don't want to pat that down. So if you've got more to say, please. But you mentioned breath work. To what extent are you find yourself practicing breath work or staying attentive to your breath over the course of the day? Like even right now, right? Are there techniques or approaches to breath work that you find relatively easy, use air quotes, to incorporate in your daily life?
Yeah, I've been really lucky to work with some awesome breathwork coaches. And I think it depends on the person's willingness to be open to breathwork. But one of the most powerful things you can do is just have an anchor breathing. Just have an anchor that you can always come back to. And, you know, for me, that kind of looks like 6 to 8 seconds in and 8 to 10 seconds out. You can do that while you're talking, while you're working out, while you're driving down the road. You can always do that. You come back to that anchor. And I think having an anchor, that's probably the most important thing that you can have. When you start messing around with like this holotropic breathing and all these different, diaphragmatic breathing, all these different difficult things, they're certainly worthwhile to explore and they can lead you a lot of different places. But I feel like those are a little bit more down the road. Maybe not, if you're ready to do it, go for it. But for just like the casual listener or the casual journeyer, I do think that anchor breath, always being able to come back to a count, 6 to 8 in, usually through the nose, and then 8 to 10 out, usually through the nose and the mouth. It's a way to regulate, and you can do that anytime during the day.
So this sounds like I'm discounting it, but I'm not, because I do breath work all the time. When you talk about breath work, does it really matter what type you're doing? Let's say I'm doing box breath, where I'm inhaling for 4, holding for 5, exhaling for 6, and repeating that. Or I'm doing your version, inhaling for 6, exhaling for 8, or whatever else. Besides I used to work with veterans in some of my things, and so one of them said that when they do box breath, which is the original box breath is inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Yep. They really didn't like that second exhale. And I probably don't need to tell you this, because that's when they would shoot. And they said that really triggered them. So as long as you have something that works for you, does the actual practice, is it that important? Or is it just are you just trying to make sure that your inhales are shorter than your exhales type thing?
I think at the beginning, it doesn't matter. It matters so much as like, if that's triggering, then that's probably not going to work for you.
Yeah.
But, as far as like what's happening inside your body and your mind, I don't think it's super important at the beginning. But that being said, like later on down the road, like when you start, kind of like that hyperventilating type breath work and real deep breaths in, and there's a practice called the Strong 20 that I was introduced to. That's really powerful way to just interrupt a lot of like thought processes. But that's a little different. But if you're just trying to, hey, I need to pause my brain in the middle of the day and just back to my breath, I think whatever works for you is what's going to work. And that extends through an entire breathwork practice. Like if you're forcing breathwork and you're not comfortable, I mean, and you can be a little bit uncomfortable, but if you're entirely uncomfortable and it doesn't feel honest to you, I think that's probably an indication that you could be doing something different to maybe something else.
Okay. I'm going to do what similar Scott just did and ask you a little bit more about the second one. So talk about grounding. All right. Some of us have yoga practices. Some of us can just go outside and walk, and that's grounding. Some of it's as simple as taking off your shoes or bare hands and walking out in the dirt or the grass or whatever else. For someone, let's say, who has no practice grounding, what would you, if I come up to you and said, hey, Rich, I need one thing that I can do that doesn't require a whole lot of time or money or expertise, what would you tell me to do?
I'd say, what do you like to do?
Okay.
What do you like to do? Because the answer is, I wish there was an answer. And honestly, I guess the answer that's probably applicable to everyone is breath work. But I mean, that can't be the answer for everything today, I think.
No, but
I would just say, what do you like to do? What's your favorite thing to do? Oh, okay. I like hanging outside. I like playing with my dogs. I like going to the dog park. Okay, perfect. Go round at the dog park. Yeah.
That's great.
I think we get like wrapped around the axle a lot of times with, just like strategies, and we have to strategize for all this. And like, that's just like a function of the ego that maybe in that case, like we can just kind of let that go for a little bit and just be by myself. I like being by myself. I like drawing. I like writing. I like playing the guitar. I like, whatever it is you like to do. Yeah, do that.
Okay. Scott, you said that I think this is the first time the veterans sit that you had. Basically, everyone had an integration coach. They had integration on site. They had integration afterwards. Have you noticed any differences in outcomes with people who have done more integration work versus those who have not? Is there anything observable quite yet?
Well, Rich was fielding the integration. Rich was the anchor for, we'll call it pre-integration, integration circles during ceremony, and afterwards we changed things up for the veteran ceremony. And so this was a weekend where everyone stayed on site, where the group, and a lot of the guys knew each other, so connected in advance, and then that helped with this kind of really strong bond that people had while they were there. They were strengthening their friendships. At the same time, they're clearing and they're going through this together, and then afterwards talking about what works for them. Mm-hmm. So each person could talk about what, like Rich was saying, well, what do you like to do? And then each one of the people that came through ceremony weekend was able to talk about what they like to do. But during those integration sessions, people are also talking about the things they don't like to do. Or like really heavy things that they've experienced in their life. Whereas Rich was saying, the trauma was happening before I went into the military. Okay. All right. So maybe I could take a look at some of that, or some of my childhood and some of the things that led me into the military, even if you wouldn't call that expressly trauma. But long-term stress certainly does count. Sure. So that seemed to be, it was really an amplifier. We're trying to amplify how things typically work when we're doing ceremony, where it's not just a vet's weekend. But what I like about Rich's approach is that almost like these pitfalls of trying this and trying that and getting all tactical wrapped around the axle, when in fact you can really just cut through it by saying, how do I feel? Like, what do I like to do? Well, in that case, right, then the breath doesn't necessarily have to be that complicated, because if you're practicing breath work, well, then you may find yourself being more attentive to how you're breathing. And that may just be enough of a finger to the wind, or you check in and like, my breathing's tight. And just that realization alone, right, gets you back to the breath. And then without even thinking about it, they're taking a long, slow breath in.
Yeah. Okay.
Cleansing exhale.
Very cool.
And then and then the next breath brings them back into that kind of attention. So it seems very like, I think, Rich, as you were saying, honest, right? Organic. You're not really trying to like force the issue and trying to find a solution by reading 1,001 self-help books, right? It's not entirely conscious. Like it does seem essential to have that unconscious aspect of yourself fluid and not clamped down. For anybody that has ever been in a position where they stop trusting themselves, all right, that's a problem, right? And if you don't trust yourself, your own instincts, your own intuition, or like you get into a place where that's challenged, that's really hard to trust.
And there's no right way or wrong way to do it. I guess there's only a right way or wrong way to do it for you. If anything, there's like small little strategies that you can try to remember as you're going through, because it's freaking hard sometimes. It's really hard. It's really hard to trust yourself sometimes. But I think that practicing gratitude and practicing curiosity are the most important things to kind of reckon with as you're processing after an experience. And usually, like if one isn't there for you, the other one can be. Sometimes you're not immediately grateful for some of these horrific things that happen in our life. And so it's like, okay, trust myself to do this. Like, why not? Like, where's that coming from? You start asking yourself questions. And I really think that becomes easier the more you practice, for sure. It definitely is a skill. Being grateful and being curious is a skill. And some people have an innate skill, they're innately good at it, and other people are not. That's okay. I think one of the gifts that plant medicine can really give us is this ability to separate our ego. And not to just completely dismiss it. So many people just get so bent out of shape about the ego. And it's like, oh, you dissolve your ego and kill your ego and da da da. And I'm like, man, like, we're human, and our ego is the way that we interact with the external world. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of important. And I use this analogy often. I really, really like it. Inside us, we have a noble king and we have a court jester. And the noble king knows what's right for his kingdom. He knows good from bad, right from wrong. He is in charge of this kingdom. And in his ear whispers the court jester. And this noble king wasn't always, an adult. Sometimes he was a boy at one point, and all he had was a court jester to look after him. And the court jester did the best he could, but he's just a friggin' court jester. He's not of noble blood. He got it wrong a lot of the times, and he still gets it wrong sometimes. And so as we kind of, figure out what that court jester is for us, like our ego, we kind of take control of this like volume knob, and we can either, we can decide to turn the volume up on the court jester, or we can turn it down sometimes. And really being able to distinguish between the court jester and the king inside of us is just, such a powerful metaphor for listening to our ego and disregarding it when we need to.
Mm-hmm. It's great. So, Rich, I'd like to delve a little bit more into your work. In your book, you quoted Terence McKenna. I'm not going to read the whole quote, but the quote is basically that ayahuasca is driven by sound. All right. In the jungle, they use icaros. Here in the U.S., we use a combination of icaros and songs and instruments, stuff like that. Have you noticed, and you have a very pleasing baritone or bass voice, have you noticed yourself while helping people integrate, whether, starting or pre-integration, pre-ceremony, whatever else, do you use your voice in any certain way to help soothe people, to help ground people, or is it something you haven't even thought about? I'm curious.
I do think that I have kind of come around to that naturally. Yeah, I really try to be regulated myself when I work with people. I think that's the most important thing that I can do, is I can lead by example and show up regulated. Mm-hmm. And for me, that is being calm and being soothing and just taking things as they come, which happens to naturally come with a little bit of lowering of my voice and speaking like this. And I have a musical background, and I love to sing. I play piano, I play guitar. And so all that is definitely not lost on me, the power of sound and music. I still listen to music, and it brings tears to my eyes sometimes. And yeah, it's not something that I spend a lot of time thinking about as far as how I'm manipulating my voice, but I do think it just kind of comes naturally, and to some extent probably always has, even before work with the medicine.
There's a lot that's conveyed simply in the sound of your voice. So there's someone, let's say, asks you the same question 3 times in a row. By the third time, you might be like, I just fucking told you. Or like, or you might be, there might be a kind of a level of irritation in your voice. Okay, so what I said was, and then perhaps, but that's not what you just said. That's not what you said the first time. And everyone, there are times where your patience can be stretched or you can be triggered. And so what you're saying, right, is like the tone of your voice may just be totally contrary to like the words you're saying themselves, right? And everyone's experienced that in an argument that's escalating. When things are going the wrong way, it's the first thing that gets thrown out of the window is the tone of voice. So sometimes people say very reasonable things in very unreasonable ways. But the reverse is also true. So that you can say things that would otherwise be really hurtful or might be difficult to swallow, let's say. And if your heart's in the right place, the sound of your voice is going to be in the right place, and you can say it. You can be honest. Now, I've seen this funny thing that happens, this economy that happens within families, and sometimes a family can work something like this. Like, I can't tell Dad. He can't hear it. Like, even if I did, he couldn't hear it. My mom kind of gets it, but, tell her, and then she can tell Dad. And so things kind of circulate sideways, and no one actually gets the news directly, and everyone gets a translation because people are scared. And the currency of the realm, if you're using this analogy of the noble king and the jester, the currency of the realm is fear, and nobody listens. How many times have I seen that, right? And things where things aren't working, right? But the most people can't hear it anyway, or like can't tell them, and there's a nervousness. So it's not. May not rise to the level like conscious fear, just a little sense of anxiety about telling someone something, whatever it is. And then the reverse is also true, where it is. My little joke used to be, maybe it still is, like, this is my face, because it didn't used to be my face, right? I thought about everything before I said it, everything. It's a real pain in the ass. And so it's far easier to be able, if you think it, to say it. Of course, there's a time to be, if I'm playing poker, telling people what's in my hand, right? There's a time and a place, right? But within the scope of reason, being as honest as you can within the moment. And so that translates into the voice. So you don't have to like consciously manipulate your voice any more than you consciously manipulate your face. Any more than you consciously manipulate your mind. You can simply bear witness and be. Well, what a relief that is, right? Because Rich is saying you can come to the moment, you can find those places, and sometimes you get clubbed upside the head with a sense of gratitude. Yeah. Who's out of flipping nowhere. Sometimes it's as a result of loss. Yeah. And like, you just feel, you look around or you see somebody else's loss, right? You see the Palisades burned to the ground, and then you look around your home. You take a moment. Let's have 4 walls and a meal. And, like a sense of gratitude where you know somebody. And to be able to convey whatever it is directly from the heart. I used to listen to famous poets on my drive from Tucson to Joshua Tree and back. But there are no famous poets. But I'd listen to they're recordings of their own work, and they were tied up in knots. They were horrible readers of their own stuff. And what I heard was this kind of like this sense of like tangled genius, because they were the line between their heart and their voice cut. Yeah. And so as a practice of reuniting the heart and the voice, right, in a sense of like to regain a sense of trust in yourself through simple acceptance, right? So you don't live with like, oh, that's my judge. Oh, yeah, I'm judging myself. Oh, yeah, that's the thing I do. Acceptance, right? So coming to a place of simple acceptance for the facts on the ground, for you as you are right now, right? Rich is there talking with Vess, and he's accepting each one of those guys as they are right now. And they get that, they hear it because he can directly from the heart. There's no like, he's not modulating the way so tell me more. None of that bullshit, right? It's all directly from the heart because he's connected that heart, from the heart to the voice. It's just like, it's a straight line. And it comes, it's a pleasure to hear, right? And it would be a joke if you tried to manipulate it. Like at this point, this would come off funny, right?
Yeah. As you've kind of been talking, Scott, I've found myself, I'm like kind of relieved that I've never considered that before, like how I talk. And I'm like, that seems like kind of like, I don't purposely try to like manipulate my voice to, sound a certain way, I do come into a session regulated as possible. But yeah, just like you're saying, it's just natural, it's not something that you have to think about.
Rich, just to expand on that a little bit, how has your own integration process affected, improved, changed how you coach others through theirs? Like, has there been something, and I'm sure there has there been something you've been working on with somebody, you got triggered by it, you went and worked on it, and then you're able to sort of help people back? Can you think of anything in particular, or just speak in general about how your own process helps inform helping other people?
Sure. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've been like triggered in a session. I don't think I've been like triggered per se, but
maybe, just maybe something's connected, whatever. Yeah. Maybe not triggered, triggered. I'm trying to use correct terms. Triggered would be the wrong word, but something like scratched at you, itched at you or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I think like that's wrong, or like that's funny, or like that's the wrong way to think about that. That's in my head. I think that, but yeah, it's kind of like, but it's not your place to say that. You know what I mean? And I got certified through Being True to You, and it was a really wonderful course for me. It was such a difference from leadership in the Army to leadership in this field, but I do think that leading by example is one of the strongest traits of leadership. And I think if you're going to be a coach, like the most important thing for you to do is to walk the walk. And you don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. It's just like in strength and conditioning, you don't have to be the strongest guy in the room, but you got to be able to put some work in, man. And people have to know that you give a shit, and that you walk the walk. And so, certainly in my integration, at least recently, my ability to get sober has been and just my pursuit of sobriety, not really my ability to do it. My pursuit of sobriety has been probably the most important thing in my ability to connect with other people going through what they're going through. And I always try to empathize the best that I can, but there's certain things that I'm unable to empathize with. I'm not a parent, so I cannot truly get there, right? I'm not a mother. I'll never be able to empathize with the complexities of being a mother, but I can listen, and I can save space. I can hold space, and I can, if I'm asked, I can weigh in, these kinds of things. But I think like in this journey of integration, the thing that's so powerful for me, is in getting sober and getting rid of alcohol in my life. So much has opened up to me. I feel like the floodgates have just cracked wide open. And it's just, like Scott was saying earlier, these moments of like gratitude just club you in the head every day. Every freaking day, it's something else with me now. And it's never been like that before for me. I've always been very lucky. I've been fairly talented in whatever I'm pursuing as well. And I've just kind of always assumed that, this is life, and I'm just doing the best I can, and whatever, working hard, play hard, blah, 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 whatever bullshit story I was telling myself. And now I'm coming around to the idea that like flourishing and thriving is more just like flowing with life, and it's not performative. It's, it doesn't mean it's not hard. It's hard work, and you can still be disciplined, and you can still put a lot of effort forth, but it's not hard anymore. It's exciting, and it's fun, and there's so much joy and fulfillment to be had, because I can walk in the grocery store. Every time I freaking go to the grocery store, I'm like, this is insane. This is insane that I can do this. Like, and that's a recent development. I'm 37 years old, and it's just happening. And I'm like, I see all this food and just colors, and I'm like, I can do anything. I went out to breakfast the other day with a friend of mine, a former client. They bring us this plate of food, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, ridiculous plate of food for brunch. I'm like, if you put this in front of an Egyptian pharaoh, the pharaoh would be like, he'd be jealous of this piece of this food that I have.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is insane. Like, this level of abundance is so, so wild. You know, it's just wild. I think people see that. I think they see that I'm honest, that I'm not making this like, I really do feel that way. And I'm honest about my journey. For a long time, I couldn't admit my faults. I didn't want to. I was very guarded about all the shit that was going on in my life, and run around telling everybody about all the horrible things I've done in my life. Like, that's kind of unnecessary, but I'm not afraid of it anymore. Like, I can face it. And I think that, I really think that ayahuasca was what taught me how to do that. And just continuing to work with ayahuasca was the catalyst to help me be honest with myself. And I think that's where it all starts. So just preaching that radical honesty. And honestly, I stole a term from Scott that I just abuse it, gentle discipline. That gentle discipline, it has really become, I think it is exactly what I try to coach now and what I try to practice myself.
That's very cool. I have a question. Let's talk practicality here. For an integration session, all right, I'm assuming that we're not all going to be able to go on an only veterans retreat where we stay the whole weekend in ayahuasca, even though one day, Scott, it'll happen. But what is a typical integration session for a person just going? What does it look like? They have 2 calls beforehand? Do they call you during the weekend? Are there planned meetings afterwards? Like, what's it like?
Yeah, so it depends on if it's going to be an individual or a group. With an individual, we can tailor it. You know, we can get really, really specific to that individual. But with a group, you know, you're going to get a mixed bag, right? You're going to get people that have done it before, people that have never done it, people that are in really, really difficult mental situations, people that are trying to kick addictions. You're going to get the whole gamut. And so for me, I think it's better to kind of like zoom out and focus on the macro and the mindset. And so that's definitely a focus. Like, breathwork is a big part of all of those sessions that we'll do before and after, with breathwork being, about a half hour of breathwork in at least one of those sessions, just to really get people to try and just because it takes time, it takes time. We're naturally resistant to it. But then it's really about kind of answering people's questions as best as you can without establishing expectations. Because, I think expectations are the thing to avoid going into ayahuasca. You can have intentions, but not expectations. And so we focus on intention setting and expectation management. That's another big part of it. And then kind of taking away some of the anxiety for people who have never done it before. There's a ton of anxiety that goes along with it for a lot of people. So I think that's just like being completely honest about what could happen and just being open about all of the possibilities. And like, you don't really know what's going to happen, but you can prepare for these situations. And then the final aspect is preparing for the integration afterwards, because that really is, that
most
is
important.
Where the it's not really where the magic happens. The magic happens in ceremony, right? But that's where the practical, the practicality really comes into your life, is that integration piece.
Now, go ahead, Scott.
I'm kind of curious. Rich, would you mind giving some examples of intention versus expectation?
I think a lot of people I think addiction is a great one to use, right? People expect the medicine to cure them, like a panacea for everything. And it's like, I'm going to go here, I'm going to get clean, and then after that, I'm not going to have to do anything after that. It's going to be gone. I'm not going to want to do this anymore. And that would be like kind of an example of an expectation maybe that people might have, that the medicine is going to cure them. And honestly, it kind of sounds silly maybe saying it out loud like that, but it's real. A lot of people have the expectation that the medicine is going to fix everything for them. And I think honestly, looking back, like one of my most important ceremonies was the first one I ever did with Arizona Yahe Assembly. And very, very subtle effects, like not a lot at all with the medicine. And I was just in my head the whole night working on all that. And I ended up working through a lot of different like judgment issues. I was being so judgy, and I really learned a ton out of it. But it's kind of besides the point. I'm getting a little bit off track, but
Fine.
but yeah, I think like, you know, managing the expectation that this medicine is going to cure you or is going to help you. You know, that kind of sets you up for failure because you just assume that it's going to work and that you are not going to work when it must do the work. And so that's why I think it's really important. Like you can set an intention and say, I'm going to ceremony to work on this addiction problem and figure out, you know, where it's coming from, because, you know, I'm doing this for a reason, right? Like I'm addicted to this probably because of another reason, right? Like I'm addicted to a substance because it helps me feel a certain way, whether it's like maybe I'm numbing something that I'm going through, some difficult thing that I'm facing. Maybe it's because like I'm an anxious person and without it, I think I'm going to struggle. You know, it could be a million different things, but I think, you know, what do you think about that, Scott? Like the difference between intention and expectation?
I think it really is it's a puzzle, you know, at the same time you've nailed it on the head, you know, and intention is flipping gold. It is. So, you know, like you're talking about, someone comes in with an addiction issue. I've noticed this thing. People like make it their intention to get clean. They do.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, it's essential. And a lot of times people are like, this is I cannot live like this anymore. And sometimes they're not asking that in a really good way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I cannot live like this. And their intention is to get clean. So that might involve clarity. All right. And then what they need some, like, I want to get some clarity on this thing. It's on top of me. I can't even see it. I need to get some clarity on it. So they get some clarity. They start to clear it. Then, all right, and they knew there's going to be some work involved. Or it could be maybe 3 months later, let's say they relapse. But they can't go back the same way. Now they see it and they're like, oh my God, what did I do that for? It's like, oh, it's so gross. I can't and they can't step back into it the way they used to. I'd overheard these two women talking one time. One of them was recovering methamphetamine addict, and the other woman had her own thing. She didn't have an addiction issue, but I was just a fly on the wall. The two of them were sitting by the fire, and I was just putting some wood on the fire. And the one woman said to the other, she said, you know, the woman without the addiction issue, she said, you know, sometimes this whole healing process feels like you're going backwards. She had no idea what the other woman's story was. She'd been going backwards. And that was part of her healing process. Now people like set their intention and it can carry them through even when they're going back. And so tension is an interesting thing, and that it's got these friction points with expectation.
And that's so interesting about managing those expectations. But I mean, half the time, you know, if you learn anything through at least repeated practice with ayahuasca, you can't expect anything. Because you never know. You never really know. Now, you know, there's been multiple times now where I've gone in with a certain intention, and within 20 or 30 minutes, oh, boom, I got all the clarity that I need. Now I have 3 more nights of ceremony, and I'm like, oh shit, now I'm talking about family and all this like deep-rooted stuff when I'm like, that wasn't even on my radar. But it's like, okay, but that's okay, right? And if the part of your intention has to be, I'm going here to work, because this is not, at least in my opinion, maybe you might have a different one, but I do think that it's hard. It's hard work. It's difficult. It's not just another drug experience. It can be if that's what you're going for, sure. But what a waste of a golden opportunity if that's what you make it.
Yeah, I've noticed it's kind of hard people to go through and have themselves a recreational experience on ayahuasca, if that's it, you know. And so it's going to defy any expectation along those lines. And I've noticed, you know, people try to push the medicine around that way, or direct its course. It'll slap them around. They're gonna they're really setting themselves up to have a hard time. And yet, people can come in with intentions that below any expectations they had, even if they didn't even think they had expectations, blow them away. So that they find themselves once they're like, sometimes there's just one little linchpin. Take that out of the way. For example, you take one element out of a habit and the whole habit disassembles. And sometimes habits are habits of mind. And so people take one little element out of a habit and then it falls away, and they start taking a look at the personal history with a whole new mindset. So they may be utterly accepting of their personal judgments. Cool, and they just see them clearly. Once those judgments are gone, then they see their mother and their father much more clearly. And then they see them as actual human beings. They're like, we're doing the best they could. And then they have this like sense of gratitude for even being alive. And then they see that their parents gave them the best of themselves. And then they see like, oh, the pain that they caused, right? They could be this cascade.
Yeah.
Simply by taking one little element out.
So, Rich, this sounds a lot, integration sounds similar to what a therapist would provide, like a psychiatrist or psychologist or something like that. Why could you speak to any differences or any specific things? Is an integration coach more just like a very focused therapist, or is it a whole different thing altogether? What's your take on, I don't want to compare therapy versus integration coach because I know they're very similar and they're both very helpful. But why would someone maybe go with the integration coach versus a standard therapist type thing when they're around ceremony time?
Yeah, it's funny. I strongly considered going back and getting a second master's degree in counseling or psychology, one of those fields. And I decided not to, partly because I didn't want another $30,000 worth of debt. But also, I really enjoy the coach relationship. And I'm I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychoanalyst. Do I enjoy reading about all of that and studying it, especially in my own mind? 100%. I find it fascinating. I think it's important. It helps me do this better. But I think the primary difference between like what I do and maybe what a therapist does is the relationship that I establish with a client. And it is not authoritative. I am not there to diagnose somebody. I'm not there to treat somebody. I'm certainly not prescribing anything to them. I'm there to show them my example. I'm there to know the X's and O's of how to do this, like that coaching piece of it, how to listen, how to hold space, how to redirect, maybe to cognitively reframe, like maybe some things that people are thinking about. But we're peers, right? Maybe you could think about it a little bit differently, but there's no authority here. If you don't want to listen, then you don't have to, man. Like, and you can do this with someone else or on your own. Like that's completely fine, because it's not my place to, try to piece together your reality. That's probably the biggest difference, is that I'm simply trying to help people figure out their own thing for themselves. I'm not trying to figure it out myself. I'm not trying to jump to any conclusions. I let them lead the way.
Okay. So it sounds similar. I would say more of like it's not quite the same, but like an older sibling, older cousin, older friend relationship rather than an authoritative parent type thing. Like you have a little bit more experience, but you're sort of on the same level as the person. Right?
Yeah, I certainly think I'm, on the same level for sure. It's funny, I'm 37, but I work with, plenty of people that are older than me. But somebody said, you got a lot of miles on you, man. It's like, yeah, there is some kind of requisite experience that is needed to do this for sure. But I'm not, super experienced with the medicine. There are plenty of people that have done it way more than I have. And there is no, it's not competition. It's not some, you get an award for doing ayahuasca. And, I just happen to believe that there is this really powerful way of regulating yourself and getting more comfortable in your own skin. And, I've found that for myself. It seems to be working. I'm open to the possibility that maybe one day it won't, and I'll have to try to keep working on it. Cool. But yeah, I hope that I can just help people get through the things that they need help getting through.
Cool.
Yeah, I love that.
Maybe
peer-to-peer aspect of it, Rich, is significant. Something I think it lays the groundwork and the foundation for people standing on their own personal agency, their own sovereignty, their own sense of personal responsibility. There's no expert, so no higher expert in the room, other than the person who's closest to their own heartbeat, closest to their own experience of their own life. And I was meditating with a friend of mine. He wanted me to introduce him to Zazen meditation. So sat there in pose on meditation mats, and after a half an hour, the bell went off, and took a moment And he said, "No, Scott, I've noticed there's a big difference between my wife telling me I need to go to the gym and realizing I really need to go to the gym." And
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
it's like no small difference, right? So it's one of the things I like about peer to peer is that it allows for people like you're talking about when you have that relationship for people to see it themselves.
And I think particularly in the veteran space, veterans don't want to see another shrink. They don't want to be psychoanalyzed again. They don't want to be told what's wrong with them. They just want someone to listen most of the time. And most of the time, they just need to be asked questions that get them to consider something in maybe a different way.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll never be able to experience someone else's reality. They're the experts on their own reality. And that's something actually that's been, we talked about earlier, maybe like something that was like triggered or something hard for me to get through when I'm working with clients. Like that's kind of something that has come up. There's been a few times where I'm just like, just fucking grab a hold of your balls and do this thing, man. Like, come on, like you're like, be stronger. I want to say, and it's so unfair and it's so inaccurate. It's like, you have no idea what, you're seeing this person in this tiny little, like I'm looking through a straw at this person's life. And I have no idea the massive amount of things that has happened in their life to lead them up to feeling this way. And if their pain is legitimate to them, then guess what? That pain is legitimate. There's nothing illegitimate about it. And so, I think that this idea of having a therapist, and there's nothing wrong with therapists, but particularly veterans have had enough of them for a little while. Is what it seems, and so they're looking for something else.
Yeah, my dad goes to VA. He sees a guy every 3 weeks, but he will not call it anything but seeing a guy. And it's cool that you framed it exactly the way he sees it. And I didn't see that for a long time. I was mad at him. Dad, you go to therapy. There's nothing wrong with that. And he's like, no, I see a guy. Okay. Eventually I came around to it, but I'm glad that you reaffirmed that same thing. Oh. I have a couple questions. Another question about your book. So Byron Katie in here, you quote a passage, a couple of questions from her seminal work, A Mind at Home with Itself. It talks about, is the thought true? Can you absolutely know it's true? How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? And who would you be without the thoughts? This sounds like you probably do a version of this in your integration work, is how do you get people to separate themselves from the thoughts that happen in their brain? And is that different pre and post ceremony? I'm curious as to any experience you have with that.
Yeah, I love that line of questioning.
Yeah.
I think it's so powerful. And it kind of, it goes back to Ram Dass. He's like, I am not my thoughts and emotions. I am the awareness that observes my thoughts and emotions. And what a powerful way of thinking. And this looks different for everyone. We're all guilty of being dominated by our emotions and our thoughts sometimes, whether they're, we spiral at night. Sometimes we have anxiety or we're angry about something and we fly off the handle. Like whatever. We've all done that before and none of us are perfect. And so I think let go of the idea that you'll be perfect at this one day. Like, okay, I'm never gonna be perfect at it. Right. But I can be aware and I can be aware of my thoughts and my feelings. And so sometimes, it kind of became popular recently. It's like the internal family systems from and you name those pieces inside of you. I think you can break it down even more, and you can. We have this practice. It doesn't work. It's not for everybody, right? But sometimes we'll say like, okay, like you have this emotion, and it's really powerful for. We practice it with like toddlers, right? Like, okay, what you're feeling, they're just upset and they're having a tantrum or whatever. What you're feeling right now is frustration or sadness or whatever it is, and that's okay. That's an okay thing. And you wait for that to kind of pass. And it's okay to label those emotions. And we forget as adults that we can do that, which is pretty, it's just as powerful now as it was back then, maybe more powerful. And so, we can take that emotion and, I like to kind of like sit it in a chair across from me. Right. And it's like, you're so angry about this. Like, okay, like let's sit that anger in the chair across from you, in this room in your mind right now. You close your eyes or not, I don't care. And it's like when you start asking it questions, like, what do you want to know about? Like, where's it come from? Like, why? like, why is it there? But like, separate yourself from that emotion, and realize that it is the result of something going on inside of you. And that you don't have to be defined by it. And it's just I love that idea that she presented. That blew my mind the first time that I read it. Those questions, it really kind of got to me. And I'm like, wow, like, I mean, it really is that simple, and you can almost always stop at, do I know if thought is true?
Yep.
No, I don't know that. I don't know. And we assume so much, and those assumptions are just, they drive us crazy sometimes. And you can usually stop right there. Like, no, I don't know that the thought is true. And like, what would I be without the thought? And it's like, oh man, I'd be a lot happier. I'd be a lot, I wouldn't have to worry about this. And so it's like, it's a really fascinating way to practice that mindfulness.
I'm really glad you included that, because it struck me too, that passage. I did a different version of it. I was thinking of last year I was talking to my partner and said, oh, what if I think the reason that person X did Y is because of Z? And she was like, okay, that's possible. Are you sure though? And I was like, yeah, because that makes sense. It makes the most plausible sense. It's all possible. She goes, did anyone tell you that? No. She goes, so how do you know it's true? And I was like, whoa. It's such a simple little thing that and obviously Byron Katie does a much better job explaining it, but such simple thing. And it stopped me from getting into one of those destructive thought loops that we too often get stuck in, which Scott usually makes me breathe through in ceremonies instead of giving me hape. So Scott, when people are in ceremonies and they are stuck in these thought loops and they're thinking too much and you can't really talk them out of it like Rich could, what are some things that you recommend people doing besides sitting straight up and breathing like you have me doing most of the time?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm kind of a doorman in ceremony, so my job is to kind of hold the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my view in ceremony is, it's not a time to do a lot of talking. It's a good time to do some exploration. And so a lot of that, as we're talking about today, is about preparation, essentially, framing things. So, in advance of ceremony, letting people know that whatever you're feeling, that's where the healing's taking place. Just that one thing. And then, addressing it some little bit in advance, because the moods that come up in ceremony can be kind of weird or unsettling or strange, or funny or laugh out loud funny, anxiety producing, joyful, calm, peaceful, tranquil. But whatever, sometimes the mood is like, starts to ramp up. So whoa, 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 whoa. People can feel that way, right?
Yeah.
But whatever you're feeling, that's where the healing's taking place. So, we let people know, or I'll let people know, like, as best you can, just feel it. Instead of getting worse, it gets better. And on the other side is another layer of inner silence, divine love, and you just be in that place for as long as you want to. So when someone's in that space, and it's ramping up, or it's icky, or they're feeling like oppressed or weighted down, I gotta lean into them and just let them not remind them. The thing you're feeling right now, that's your healing right there. As best you can, just lean into it. Just feel it. That's all you have to. And sure enough, people lean into it, they feel it, they come back, they come into that place. And instead of getting worse, it gets better. And it starts to let go of its hooks. Right? And what's true in ceremony is what's true out of ceremony. So you're feeling triggered, take a moment, let yourself feel it. Right? It's got its own vocabulary. And it's good, it's nice to, it's helpful, it can be helpful to, name those emotional states. But even if you can't, right, just, check in. Right? Maybe it's something it's new to you. It's a mixed emotion. You don't quite have the words for it. It's okay. Just as best you can, just feel it. And then it starts to let go. And maybe in that moment, you found yourself taking a breath and feeling a cleanse. Okay. You're feeling it. And then it's starting to let go. And then people come back into their own body. Right? And so you could view it as sleight of hand, right? I'm just talking with people as little as possible to bring them back to how they're feeling right now in the present moment. But most of the time, virtually all the time, they're already doing it. They're already doing what needs to be done. I'm just reminding them what they're already doing in the moment. And they add one little element to it. of just like the thing that they're feeling to actually feel it. And then things start to shift. And it's an honor to be a witness to that. I find that inspiring. Like people come to that moment and then it's theirs 100%. I didn't intrude between them and the divine. I wasn't like barging in. I wasn't like mucking around with their internal process. It was simply like the suggesting of the thing that they'd really given a nod to before they came in ceremony. Like, this is why I'm here. This is my intention. I'm like this is a place where I'm coming for healing. And I'm going to recognize and acknowledge the thing that's right in front of me. I was not having to intrude nothing into that moment. And then it's like, as it starts to ease up, I can step away.
I like it.
And then they're back on their mat and like, and going wherever that takes them. And I think, Tyler, like, you've seen that as well. And I've seen that with how Rich works with the people he works with for integration. I've seen that process as well. And it's just, it feels good. It feels just like inspiration.
I love that you were mentioning, like you don't say much during, it's not the time to say much during ceremony. And it's like, I think of ceremony as like championship game, right? And it's like, you've done the preparation ahead of time, fully. And if you haven't, then, you're going to feel that in the game. There's nothing you can do now. You can't prepare for it while you're in the game, and I also just love that like ability to like lean into it, to try to lean into it. Jung had this idea that most mental health afflictions come from people's inability to face their actual suffering, like the source of those mental health afflictions. And I'm not sure it's 100% true, but it's at least an interesting idea. And, a lot of times work with the medicine allows us to be granted access to those things that we've repressed and those things that we have been unable to face until that point. And that could be really scary. It could be really difficult and really uncomfortable. But if you are able to lean into that discomfort in the moment, it can be so healing. Exactly what you said. That is where the healing takes place.
So, Rich, have you taken, let's say, a singular client or a group of clients, have you taken them through multiple ceremonies over the course of many months? Or are you are you doing like one ceremony? Like if I signed up for you, I would do one ceremony. Have you had repeat clients who've come back that you've seen progress? Have you been able to track anything like that?
Yeah. So I've had one that has done multiple ceremonies. Okay. The one that we just did in Veterans Day though, over Veterans Day weekend, that was kind of like a one-off, so we had the 3 ceremonies and, gosh, I would love to continue working with, over time. I think like, oh, that'd be so cool. It's kind of like a dream come true, but most people do the one ceremony and then, it's kind of like, it's like championship game, for that. But that being said, I used to be of the mind that, I was like, why do people need to sit with medicine so much? I don't understand, but I've since kind of like released that judgment, and it's whatever, everyone's relationship is different. And now, I really treasure the opportunity to sit with it many times. But what I've kind of seen is it becomes more of like a compass check. Then like, hopefully you're able to deal with, and those repeat customers, right? Like, they've usually had quite a bit of success in like dealing with like a big problem that they had identified in their life already. And so now it's more of like, actually Ulysses and I were talking about it the other day, like what is your reason for going back and exploring the medicine, continually exploring the medicine. And both of us were kind of like, it's like this accountability factor in my life, just like Scott says, like the medicine, it'll smack you down if you're not respecting yourself and respecting the process and you're being honest. And, I think that's a really powerful accountability tool. And yeah, so I see it kind of like it becomes certainly, I don't know if easier is the right word, but people get better at navigating the experiences, and they get better at leaning into the discomfort a little bit more often when it comes. And then, they also kind of like, there are still those moments where, shoot, like I just got messed up that night. Like it was brutal. It was really hard on me, and I don't have an explanation for it. We can't interpret it any other way than, it's what was Hunter S. Thompson's quote? It's like the cost of forced consciousness expansion, tune in, freak out, get beaten. But yeah, it seems like more of like a compass check now,
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because that's what, when I first took my Peruvian trip in September of this last year, and they said the same things. The shaman's like, the ayahuasca is not actually going to heal you. It's just checking to see where you are, to see what we need to work on next. And I thought that was really enlightening. As someone who sat dozens and dozens of times, a lot of it is, now a lot of it is helping other people. So I'm not really sitting all often and do my work. I'm helping other people. But knowing that ayahuasca itself is never really the healing part. It's the before and definitely the after, which is almost more important than ayahuasca. Obviously, it's not more important. They're about equal. So for you, Rich, for integration clients, is there anyone who would not benefit from having integration coaching before and after ceremonies? Is there any personality type that you can think of being like, yeah, they're fine. They probably don't need my help. We're good.
Oh man, I'm sure there are people that don't need my help.
So I'm assuming there's a very emotionally healthy person with a great family and great family support system who doesn't need it. But then again, they're probably not going to sit in ayahuasca for more than one time either, because they already might feel good. So I don't know.
I wouldn't want to make any. I wouldn't want to make any assumptions, and I'm certainly not like the world's foremost best integration coach. I doubt that. But yeah, I think I want to sit with a coach every time, and I want to see what comes up. And because a lot of times we just, we get talking and, stuff comes out of our mouths and I'm like, holy shit, did I just say that? Like that, what does that mean? And and then you get asked a question that from a person with a different perspective than you. And if they're good at asking questions, then, it can be a really powerful experience and just really, really helpful. And, you may not need it, but it can still be really helpful. And, maybe I'm sure there's a super emotionally helpful or a healthy person out there that, is doing all the work and is writing everything down and is super mindful and all of these things. But I still think just having a friend, friend, a confidant, a person that maybe they're not like, actively trying to coach you into doing something with your life or doing something differently, but certainly a confidant that you can ground with, that you can unpack with, and, maybe you can interpret things with, and then begin to, kind of integrate with.
So I do have a question for you about integration for really hard ceremonies. So I know that another quote from your book, you quoted Ram Dass, talks about when judging ourselves or judging other people too harshly, you turn people into trees, right? You see some of them don't grow the same way you think they might because they don't have water or enough light, or they got choked off by somebody else or whatnot. So how do you handle integration questions that maybe came or people think came from ceremony itself? Because likely it's being triggered by other people going through their own stuff. It's very unlikely that someone is actually another person's harming you during ceremony. But is that something that's come up for you? And does it take a different type of integration work? Or
are you talking about like an actual experience in ceremony, or are you talking about like a bad trip?
Let's say you and I are sitting next to each other and I'm screaming the entire time because I'm going through my own stuff. That's what I got to go through. And you are triggered by that because let's say in your past screaming has meant something. Is there a different approach to that for integration questions that for instances that happen during ceremony?
Yeah, there's only your experience during ceremony, right? So it's funny that you mentioned that because I had firsthand. I think a lot of us probably have firsthand experience with exactly 100%.
That. And they needed to, and there's nothing wrong with that. Never judge a person for it.
And it's okay. It's okay that you're upset by it too. Like all of it's okay. You cannot expect to be good at something the first time that you do it. It's very rare that someone is. And ceremony is no different. And I remember my second ceremony, my most difficult ceremony ever. I was like, I felt everything changing, right? Like I feel the walls are dripping, and I'm like, oh shit, like this is not gonna be good. This is not going.
Was that with Scott?
And no, this was in Peru. And and I'm kind of like, oh boy, like I don't really know what to do right now, and I'm scared, and I'm like trying to hang on to my head, and this guy across the room is purging like Oh my God. Like the worst purge ever, like
Yeah.
so loud. And I'm like,
Yeah.
he's doing it on purpose, you know, like he's purging so loud, like shut. And I'm just in my head about all this
Yeah.
stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And in that moment, there's not much you can do about, you know, your reaction to that, right?
Yeah.
But afterwards, you can examine it. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know, why was I mad at him? It's purely a projection of my own
Mhm.
problems.
Yep.
Too.
Yep.
And most of the time that's the case. You know, of course
Mhm.
there's different cases and you have to explore that individually with everyone. But yeah, most of the time, like that anger that we have, that
Mhm.
someone is distracting us or whatever,
Mhm.
like, okay, like that's valid. All right.
Mhm.
Like your anger is valid. Where's it coming from? Because you can't stay concentrated. You can't concentrate enough to stay in your own experience. And you know, like, what about them? Like, you know, do you not care what they were going through? Like, they were going through something probably really hard, you know? So, like, there's all these different questions to kind of explore around those experiences. And it doesn't mean they're easy for sure. But yeah, it always comes back to your experience. And you know, because you have no control over someone else's and what they're going to do and, you know, how they react. And you only have control over how you engage with your own thoughts during ceremony.
Ooh, that's a good one. You only have control over how you engage with your own thoughts during ceremony.
Nice.
I like that.
You know,
I like
it's
that a lot.
interesting. You mentioned, we're talking about integration and the types of people that respond best to it, and the level of need or how essential it is as part of the introduction and the tail end of ceremony. And I think of this peer-to-peer aspect of it. When Ulysses Lopez started the I mission, they thought, you know what, we'll set up a battle buddy deal, and we'll each new guy that's coming in, it's his first time in ceremony, we'll set him up with somebody who's more experienced. And then you get a battle buddy, and so I missions kind of carried that battle buddy approach all the way through, and they carried that into the vet weekends that we did over Veterans Day, and it applies also outside of ceremony. So I really like the peer-to-peer aspect of it. And then the question is how to connect people up. You've got a community, right? And so it's nice to have some people around who share that outlook or that experience. So we had this one woman who started coming in. It was just her. And then she brought a cousin in. She lives up in Washington State, but she has family down in Tucson. So she'd come down from time to time. And then her daughter came into ceremony. And then her her son and her husband and then her other son and then her sister-in-law. The whole At one point, I think they had 8 people in one ceremony.
From one family in one ceremony?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. How cool is that?
I love it, right? And also, fathers and daughters, or
Yeah.
mothers and sons, or friends coming in and then connecting people who are getting married. It's like all different walks of life. And the ceremony is a way to mark their own. It's a kind of like common field that they an outlook that they can share with each other and reference, and then they can support each other and come in the ceremony, kind of like this battle buddy approach. But it's also true afterwards. So I see people all the time, and we actually hold our membership, and like overwhelmingly, people are connecting up with people in ceremony, and then following up with them after ceremony. So that peer-to-peer aspect of it, yeah, I think can run really deep, as a way of each individual honoring their own personal, like their own conscience, their own sense of peace of mind, like the lessons for navigating that apply to themselves, that may be helpful to somebody else. And so whoever they're connecting with gets to see the lessons they've come back with from ceremony, uh, uh, applied through the lens of somebody else's experience, or vice versa. You can learn through somebody else. You can take in what they have to say to the lens of your own intuition. So it's Yeah. All boats rise in a rising tide. People, as they go through this process, are dusting off their point of witness, their capacity to be present and mindful to what's going on with them in the moment, allows them to like deepen their conversation with others and learn through their experience. It resonates in some way with their own. Both for the both the good and the bad. Both like you know, it's one thing to be strong, but strength without flexibility is brittle. So people, it's one thing to like receive a lot of answers, but if you're not open and receptive, it's hard to take anything new in. And so that these I see people within the community learning from each other in this fashion, where it's strictly speaking peer to peer, and which is another. I'll keep on singing your praises, Rich. This is another thing I like about your approach, and the thing is, your approach is embedded within this community of other people who are learning from these ceremonial forms. And I could go off at this point because I've seen the new rules for clinical application of psilocybin up in Oregon.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, God.
And I'm, maybe I missed something, but all of the text and all the wonky text they have for the management of the substance within the clinical setting, there is no room set aside for the clinicians sitting with psilocybin.
Nope.
And so I'm like,
weird.
I've got to be, I went through it. If someone listening to this podcast sees any different, please let us know.
Yes.
But the other approach is that you have people who are able to speak from their direct experience. It's what they've learned directly, and that's being applied too. It's being applied in ketamine. It's being applied in the MDMA trials. It's being applied in other fashion, ibogaine, etc. The people that are working with the ayahuasca as a sacrament, or the either other sacraments, or they're working with psychedelics, have been informed through their own practice. And these two ceremonial forms, and many of them overlapping in kind of a Venn diagram kind of way with ayahuasca. That's really interesting. That's a sea change. We're seeing psychologists come through, counselors come through our circle in ceremony, who are lateraling from traditional counseling methodologies into psychedelic assisted therapy. And what does that mean for them? They're like, I was talking with one of them. There was a husband and wife, and you've like, you get so invested in people. Now you see them for years, and you see their struggles and see their ups and downs. He said, I never expected in my 60s that I'd be lateraling out into psychedelic assisted therapy. It's a totally different form. Because instead of seeing people for years, I might see them over the course of 8 sessions, and I don't see them anymore.
Yeah.
A totally different, that's a totally different roadmap. And I mean, and then she may see people from, after that. I expect that, at the risk of expecting anything, that, then you might have clients that you see from time to time, but it's not every week for an hour. Ding, see you next week. 8 sessions, and he doesn't see them for a couple of years. They come in for a few more sessions, doesn't see them for a few more years. That's a totally different game plan. But when I look at that, I think, those are a lot of counselors and a lot of psychologists who are going to sit with the medicine. That's extraordinary. And yet, when it comes to clinical regulations, they have, like, I don't see any guidelines for its application and use and training. What the heck? Like like you're prescribing a statin drug, So, but at the same time, I see within, it went to the MAPS conference, and a lot of the people that are working with ketamine, the clinicians, have sat with ayahuasca. And what are they doing? They're applying what they learned through ayahuasca in ketamine sessions afterwards for preparation, for post-integration. That's encouraging. So
Yes, it is.
in some ways, there's a friction between traditional applications of pharmacology in which the prescribing agent never touches stuff. That's
So weird.
that, yeah, and so, but that model does not graft with sacramental use of ayahuasca. It's just, and so there, there's some cautionary tales, but there's also tremendous, like a wellspring, what I would call just flat out inspiring stories of people who are making their own direct connection with the divine, and counselors who are learning the same lesson, who are willing to meet people at the level at a peer-to-peer level.
Yeah.
Which is which may set the standard.
And that's an excellent segue. So, Rich, I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about the battle buddy idea in response to Scott a little bit, but that kind of ties into my next question for you, which was, what prompted you to write the book? Is because it feels like I could read this book and have a pretty good idea of what to expect from generally an Aya experience.
Yeah.
And I also would have a little bit of preparation. Obviously, it wouldn't be a one-on-one coaching type thing, but did you write the book in order to be able to just to share your story, or was it to connect with other people? Like, dive into a little bit of that.
Yeah, I love writing. I write all the time. It's it's probably the favorite thing to do.
Sorry to interrupt you quick. Again, The Magic is Real, Ayahuasca Integration and Non-Ordinary Reality by R.T. Mulder. It's available on Kindle and paperback.
Yes.
It's on paperback. Kindle and paperback on Amazon right now for less than $15 for either. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. I started off, it's like anything, right? When you start to write something, I've written 2 other books and they're both fiction novels, but they're, it's a passion project. I love writing, and I knew I wanted to write about this. And I just kind of, I started off just wanting to write about my journey through this, in particular, the integration piece, because I really think that we are at an interesting time. And I look back at the introduction of cannabis, recreational cannabis, and I'm like, man, we fucked that up so bad.
So bad.
So
bad.
And I look at all of, especially now, because like so many people that I work with are veterans and they're trying to kick cannabis habits. And so they went from having an opioid addiction, from the prescribed pills from the VA, to then having a cannabis addiction. And now they can't even, get out of bed without cannabis, and they can't function without, can't do anything without it. And that's just so not the narrative that was pitched as cannabis was becoming recreational. And so I kind of like, it was a little bit of this piece where I just think that there needs to be more honesty in the space on both sides, on the good and the bad. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And I also, I thought about what I would like to read before a ceremony, before my first time doing anything, what I would have liked to have known, that I know now. I'm also just fascinated by this space. I write from a place of fascination. I truly think that this is the most powerful thing on earth. And, I certainly will write more on it in the future. But it was kind of like a combination of all those things. And like any writing project, it kind of takes on a life of its own once you start. And it started kind of coming together, and I was like considering like, oh man, I could make this like a really like a big thing, and I could have like this, there's so much more that you could write about, I look at something like How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, and I'm a reader too. I love reading all of these different opinions and things. And I'm like, man, I could make it something more like that. And I was kind of like, no, I think I can be like pretty short, pretty sweet, make it accessible, and make it interesting. I think what a lot of people are not talking about in their books about ayahuasca is their personal experience and how exactly it went, and how it was important for them in their own lives. It was really, really fun to write, honestly. Some of the science heavy stuff, I kind of like doing that too. I find it really interesting what it's actually doing to your brain. It's the serotonin agonist, and when you understand that, you're like, okay, well, it is important that I'm ready for that on the back end, right? And I have this whole like counterbalance that my brain's going to try to do to get me back into homeostasis. And let's be aware of that, maybe. And yeah, so it was a combination of all of those things that got me started. And then I really enjoyed, it's very therapeutic for me too. That's another part of it. So like all of those things kind of went into it. Right now, I've really I'm really interested in this idea of human flourishing. And I think that I think that there's so many people that I come across that are really pessimistic and negative about what the future might look like. And most of it's driven by what they see on their phones and and social media and all this, negativity. And I can't help but feel the exact opposite. I was in a workshop the other day and somebody used the term like impending goodness. I was like, oh, that's perfect. It's exactly how I feel. It captures exactly how I feel. This impending goodness is coming. I can feel it. It's real strange. And I see now that I think like I think plant medicine and people kind of changing the stigma surrounding psilocybin and ayahuasca and ibogaine and all these really powerful medicines. I see that happening on one side. I also see the ancient wisdom that comes with that. These ancient practices, the ceremonial, respectful practice with these medicines. And then I see modern medicine on the other side and the miracle that is modern medicine. And I'm like, these things are not that different. They don't have to be different. What's the saying? It's like, get comfortable get comfortable engaging with and not or. And it's like, yeah, both of these things are miraculous. And it's like, where is that intersection? I'm not sure what the intersection is. I don't know if it's going to be like quantum physics that brings this whole like idea of meditation and the quantum realm and all these things that, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about and like, know what it is. I have no idea. I think it's coming. And maybe not in my lifetime. I don't know, but I certainly want to fall in love with the pursuit of that idea because it's just beautiful to me. And I think that wherever ancient wisdom and modern technology intersect, I think that is the jump off point for maybe the exponential increase in human flourishing. Because we have everything that we need, and there's so much love in the world. So many people just gorge themselves on this diet of hatred that their phone pushes to them. More people, at least that I'm seeing, are checking out of that, and they're like, I don't want this in my life anymore. Like my life is not well served reading this and looking at this and becoming emotionally invested in this. It's like I have a relatively short amount of time left on this planet, and man, am I really making the best of it right now? And so yeah, it's like I don't know. I'm really fascinated by what is happening, and part of that's innate curiosity, but I think Scott and I have talked about this too. Just having this experience with the divine, and I think that's the word that I choose for it.
Creator, source, divine, whatever you want to call it.
However you define it for yourself. Everyone kind of, I find it very difficult to define, but I know it's there. I know I know that I had this experience, right? And now it's my choice. It's like, Scott was saying earlier, like I can't look back, I can't go back that way anymore. You know what I mean? Like there is only forward for me now. And like what a gift to have received that. Now I get to choose to engage with the divine when I want to, and as often as I try. It's oh my gosh, it's just so special. And like if I can play like the smallest role in helping someone else experience that amount of like true love, this divine love, if I can help get someone a little bit closer to that, then I mean that's the best thing I could possibly do on this earth.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, so it sounds like you're an advocate for plant medicine more than just to heal people who are sick or traumatized or whatever else. And I'm reading right here from one of your YouTube headlines: plant medicine for the betterment of well people.
Yeah.
And so, Scott, I'm curious, because if anyone was going to develop superpowers from ayahuasca, you'd probably have done it by now. What are your thoughts? I know that most of the ceremonies, most people come to there for healing. They're there to fix something or adjust something or change something. Have you had talks with a lot of people who are there just for the betterment of wellness? Like, are they there just to touch the divine? Are they there? What are some other reasons that people come to ceremony besides, I say just, and I don't mean to derail this, but just healing?
Well, it takes all sorts of different forms. So, for example, a number of our facilitators, as they were starting to work with the medicine. I can think of more than just one of them. They were really shy about singing. And then bit by bit, they started, their voice started to open up, and they started to learn some more songs. And then that whole world opened up to them. And so they, learned the songs. They found themselves learning Quechua because a lot of the songs are in Quechua. And not just learn a cappella, but then pick up the charango or the guitar, learning, all of a sudden, a talent that they never had, wasn't even on their roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
And they developed this talent that accelerates for music.
Mm-hmm.
As a for instance, there was a firefighter who came in initially for PTSD, and so he gets a leg up on it. It's like way up and over it, and then he starts bringing in. He's a lieutenant in the fire department, so he starts bringing other guys in from his department. Why? Because they've got PTSD, and he can see it, and they start getting over their PTSD, and then. After, I don't know, he wasn't coming in every weekend, but every so often he'd come in. After about a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years, he takes out his phone, we're chatting. He's like, check this out. He's like, when I was a kid, when I was in high school, I was like a really talented painter. But life intervened. I set that aside, and I took on to much more practical things. I had to pay bills. He said, but I got back into painting. And then he takes out his phone. He shows me these photographs, these phenomenal murals, and they're not small either. Like these massive mural paintings that he's doing, extraordinary. There was a woman that came through ceremony. She had this vision of this tiny frog with this kind of funny coloring, not just green and yellow, but I think it was a blue frog. And she's a mathematician, PhD, but she was like, that frog actually exists. Well, then she starts doing a little research, and that frog is an Amazonian frog, but it only exists in a little corner of the Amazon. So she goes down the Amazon, and she becomes the world-renowned expert on that particular frog.
Yeah.
But the point isn't like you're necessarily going to have. It's just the medicine start bringing people in to fanning the flames what they're passionate about, what they love to do. That's it, right? So if that's your, you can share it with other people about loving what you do. What's true is that there's no avoiding hard work in this life, for a fact. But you can choose a path with heart. Life's load.
Yeah.
And so that's what I see. And I see people come in. I may see people actively for a period of time, and then I don't see them for a year. They come in, maybe they take an energetic hit, maybe it's just part of their learning or their particular curve or trajectory. And so then I see them. Now look, and they people grow, they change, right? They have stories to tell. They've been on adventure. And likewise, it's really interesting to see how this community is connected all over the globe. So that the people that you meet in one ceremony are sitting, maybe they're going down to Peru, and then you get out of Peru, or then you meet someone that they know, etc. People tend to start working mutual support with each other, or connecting, if not directly, but oddly enough, they're connected through a mutual friend. So how does that play out? When I was at the MAPS conference last, there's a Palestinian and Israeli. I think I've told this story before, but they were getting Palestinians and Israelis in ayahuasca ceremonies. Couldn't do it in Palestine for obvious reasons. They couldn't do it in Israel, but they could do it in Spain. So they had their ayahuasca ceremonies in Spain. I'll spare you the long version of it. Their takeaway was, forget about peace between the Palestinians and Israelis. Forget about it until we've healed our shared trauma.
Yeah.
But the stories that we're telling were stories of healing the shared trauma.
Yeah.
I was like, it's happening, right? And we're impassioned by it. Right? And so then people are able to set aside or get over their inability to just even sit in a group of people or sit in a committee. I'm like, Rich, how many vets do you know that have been at a stage where they couldn't sit on a committee to save their flipping life. They were the guy who would be like, okay, do you honestly think that? And then anything they said after that would just get them in trouble. And they would piss off everybody in the room, and they would walk out of there self-righteous as hell. Fuck you, Pete. I'm gone. But as if the only alternative was to stow it down deep.
Yeah.
Right? And not be true to themselves. Well, screw it. I'm going to be true to myself. And it's not, and so then they come to a place where it's not mutually exclusive. They're not politicking. They're not faking it. They're impassioned, and they can sit on a committee. Well, you know what happens when you get that? Then those guys are flipping forces of nature, and they're getting into politics. They start getting into politics. All politics is local. O'Neill famously said. And so people start, they start showing up, and they can work with people, bring them along, teach them, right? They can help people take it to the next level. They can function local, in a very local fashion, but it also brings something into like county, state, and national politics. That was what we're seeing right now. So then we start seeing the emergence of guys like Rick Perry, who was just on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Rick Perry, the ex-Texas governor,
former governor of Texas, right? So that podcast is worth checking out for anybody who's out there. But there's Rick Perry. He's like, I am a certified Neanderthal conservative. I got the calluses on my knuckles to prove it. But he's in favor of it as they're being used in the context of healing vets that have PTSD. And he's seen this. That podcast goes into ibogaine, like its value, touches on the Kentucky Opiate Initiative, and then how it's being adopted in Texas. And that it was also spearheaded. There was another veteran on the show talking about his experience, and as an attorney. In any event,
it's worth listening. That's for sure. Sounds like
worth listening to. And you have the veteran community where these vets are the salt of the flipping earth, right? But what I like about vets is that they have skill sets. They understand the esprit de corps. They understand organizing. They understand what they value. So, and as they get over their PTSD, they can apply those skill sets with functional principles and values for bringing people together.
Nice.
And that's extraordinary. And you could say that the game has been, after like a century or more of war, that a lot of these vets come back from war and they're not capable of functioning, operating full throttle in politics.
Oh, yeah.
That's not their game. Thank you. Yeah. They just completely step away from that.
Yeah.
But increasingly now I'm seeing that they can.
Yeah.
And the result is we're seeing deep-seated political change, yet at an interesting level. Because it's not about people making speeches. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about, although we're seeing that. But we're seeing it inside the VA. You're seeing it in Veterans Affairs. You're seeing it within the medical community. You're seeing it within referendums. You're seeing it as people are able to address and talk about this within their own community. It's significant, right? That veterans are able to step up and function together in public life in a way that has eluded them, or eluded the nation for quite some time.
It's
Go ahead, Rich.
It's really, I love everything you just said, Scott. It's so cool. It's tremendous what's happening in the veteran community. When I first got out of the military, I was like, I don't want anything to do with the VA. I don't want to talk to a veteran. I don't want to talk about the Army. That's my old life. I'm done with it. And I don't Like that's it, right? But then 2020 happened, and the pandemic, and I owned a gym, and I'm like, as everyone's did, right? Like my worldview got rocked in 2020, and I was of the mind like, well, I gotta put food on my family's plate. Like I can't be closing down, and like I said, I didn't go to war to be forced to close my business and be told what to do for this, and and it was not a political decision for me. Anything to do with just supporting my family, right? And the only people that were espousing some of the same beliefs that I was, at least that were vocal about it, were veteran entrepreneurs. And I said, that's pretty cool. That was like my first kind of like crack the door open to get back into the veteran space. And then we started working with this group called Merging Vets and Players. And Merging Vets and Players, they met every Wednesday night. They still do at my gym in Phoenix. And we shut the gym down. And it's just like a quick workout for combat vets and current and former professional athletes. And there's a lot of similar like loss of identity, loss of tribe, loss of community and purpose for a professional athlete as there is for a veteran who leaves the service. And so it's bringing those two communities together, quick workout, but then the real deal is the huddle afterwards. And there's no plant medicine involved. It's just pure support. And I see these like hardened men talking about their deep-seated issues and trauma and addictions and problems. And I'm literally watching people's lives get saved, and I'm just like, I'm still blown away by it. I was blown away by it when we went to down to Arizona and did those last 3 ceremonies with Arizona Yacht Assembly. And I'm like, anytime that this veteran community, which has so much brokenness in it, so much strength in it, and they are coming together right now, and they've been given platforms with technology, that makes it stand up. And like, if there's one thing that is kind of common across the board with vets is like, they will tell you what they think. They will tell you how they may not always be right, but they'll tell you how they feel. And all that, it's a really unique position for the veteran community to be in. And I'm just so proud of the veteran community for beginning to rise to the occasion and to champion the healing of their fellow man. It's beautiful to see, and that's with or without plant medicine. It's a really special time because there's so much manipulation and there's so much that goes into the decision to fight for your country. And a lot of it's you're a young man and you're very easily swayed by these ordeals, and there's like a romance to going to war, and then you do it and you're like, holy shit, was I wrong about that? Like none of that's true, but there is also a sense of pride for doing that. And it puts you in a very different group than people who haven't done it. And it's just like ayahuasca in that, you can't explain what that feels like to somebody who hasn't done it. And, I feel the exact same way about ayahuasca. And I'm really proud of the veteran community leading from the front, being the guinea pigs for some of this stuff and talking about it openly and freely. And I really hope we continue setting the standard in this space as far as being good stewards of the work.
Yep. That's fantastic, Rich. We're at the end of our allotted time, so let's leave on that high note. Let's just go with that. I love it. So people can find you. Your name is Rich Mulder. We'll put all this in the show notes. People can find you at Apricus. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, apricuscoaching.com for sure.
And then you have a YouTube channel with at least 7 videos I'm looking at right here that are you just talking about a bunch of different topics, plant medicine, wellness related.
Yep. All holistic health coaching. Plant medicine is certainly important to me, but it's not on everyone's radar, and that's okay too. I know there's a lot of curiosity about it in the space, so I love talking about it, but I really like talking about just becoming better as individuals even more. My background is in physical fitness as well, so that's a big piece of it. Physical fitness, mental health and wellness, spiritual development, and just community.
Cool. I'm Tyler Hurst. You can find me at microdose.yoga, and that's Scott Stanley over there. Scott, you're on Facebook. You're also at aya.guide, a couple of different places, right? Aya.guide is the best way to find you. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, it's extraordinary. I love it. I think this might count as, this is a bit of a renewal, but this might count as the first podcast of the series. Maybe Tyler will actually have a name for this podcast for the next time.
We're working on it. I need an integration coach. I need to integrate the name that I'm thinking of. So maybe I'll call you Rich.
Yeah, yes. Rich, total pleasure, my friend. That was
always
total pleasure.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stare at the screen for about 5 seconds while I press stop, and then if we could all do that and just stare.